peals of laughter began to break out in the crowd. It was definitely a unique and bold choice of the organizers to include this highlight, and is probably something that will never be done again. Number 14. The biggest firework ever. Ever since fireworks were first invented, there's always been someone who's wondered how large a detonation is possible from a rocket. The answer, as was proved in early February 2020, is very, very big. The record attempt happened at Steamboat Springs, Colorado for the Winter Carnival and saw a 2,797-pound shell being launched into the air. It was almost 5 feet in diameter, was made with 51 miles of gummed paper tape, and contained 380 individual comet fireworks. It was so huge that it couldn't be launched like a regular firework, and required the construction of a 5-foot wide and 26-foot deep mortar to fire it from. When it reached altitude and detonated, it emitted so much light that the entire area was illuminated in a blaze of red and orange, and if locals hadn't known any better, they would have surely thought the world was about to end. Number 13. Daytime fireworks. One of the limitations faced by organizers of fireworks displays is that they can only be done at night. But what if they could happen when it's light instead? That's the idea behind daytime fireworks, which instead of relying on explosives to emit light, release large plumes of colored powder and smoke into the sky. They're an ingenious idea that allows for a very different type of display and are becoming increasingly popular around the world. It's much safer for events to take place during daylight, and the displays are arguably just as enthralling. A much wider range of colors can be used, and it's also far better for the environment. Number 12. Meswell-Laurent firework suit. There are some world records that you probably think would either be quite fun to try, and then there are others that only the bravest or most foolhardy of people would ever attempt. Meswell-Laurent certainly falls into the latter category, because in 2014 he set the world record for the most number of firework rockets to be launched from a pyrotechnics suit. He's worked with fireworks all of his life, and to complete the challenge he designed a special cotton suit that was inspired by what firefighters wear. During the attempt, he stood on stilts so the rockets could be fired off in all directions, and during the display 642 individual fireworks were set off. This definitely isn't something you should try at home. Number 11. The Transient Rainbow. Kai-Kuo Chang is an internationally renowned artist who has used a variety of different materials and techniques in his displays over the years. One of the most stunning took place in 2002 over the East River between Manhattan and Queens in New York, and was called the Transient Rainbow. On one June evening, 1,000 multicolored peony fireworks were detonated at precise times thanks to computer chips that were attached to each one. In over 15 seconds, it created a glorious arc of color over the famous backdrop. It was done in collaboration with the Museum of Modern Art to celebrate the opening of their venue in Queens, and to this day remains one of the most beautiful singular fireworks displays that's ever taken place. Number 10. Heart-shaped fireworks. Fireworks have been around for thousands of years, but as the industry explores new chemicals and techniques to create the bursts of light in the sky, they've developed new ways to generate shapes like never before. It's a real highlight for crowds to see something they don't expect, and at this display in 2009, they weren't disappointed. Amongst the usual types of rockets, there are some that release red stars in the shape of hearts, and every time one detonates, you can hear the cheers of excitement. If shapes like these are already possible, it may not be too long until Gandalf's displays become reality. Number 9. Smiley face firework.
That is amazing.
Fireworks are all constructed along a similar design. When you light the fuse, it ignites gunpowder inside the mortar that propels the rocket into the sky, and just a fraction of a second later, it detonates the second charge, known as the bursting charge, which causes the entire shell, which is full of gunpowder and stars, to explode. This is how the large showers of light are created, but by altering the way it's put together, simplistic shapes can be created. These are smiley face fireworks. And while they might seem complicated, they're actually fairly easy to make when you know how. Instead of packing the shell full of powder and chemicals, a piece of card is put inside that has the chemicals stuck to it. The shape you create as you attach material to the card is what it'll look like when it explodes. So in this case, the dots of powder would have been arranged like a smiley face. It only works for basic designs, but by using this principle, much more complicated ones may one day be possible. Number 8. Giant Catherine Wheel. Catherine wheels are an absolute must at any large fireworks display, and are named after St. Catherine of Alexandria, who, according to legend, had been sentenced to death by breaking on the wheel. But when she touched it, it flew apart in pieces. These types of fireworks can be small enough to have in your backyard, but the largest ever was displayed by Lily Fireworks Company in Malta in 2011 for the annual Our Lady of the Lilies celebration. It was just over 105 feet in diameter and amazingly managed to complete 4 full rotations under its own propulsion. While that doesn't sound like much, the science behind making a structure like this turn is extremely complicated and required several tons of explosives to make possible. No one has been close to breaking the record since, and with the amount of resource and effort needed to make one bigger than this, it will likely stand for many years to come. Number 7. The Niagara Falls. The Niagara Falls is famous for being one of the largest and most beautiful waterfalls in the world. So it seemed fitting that at the 2008 Ariake Sea Fireworks Festival in Japan, the world record attempt for the largest fireworks waterfall was named after it. The shower of sparks was 11,539 feet and 5 inches long, which is just over 2 miles. The display was so impressive that it now returns at every event every year, and more than 100,000 visitors travel to see it, which is all the more impressive considering the town where it's held has only 50,000 residents. The effect is created by suspending rockets along the desired route by wire, so when they're detonated, they don't shoot up into the air, and instead shower the sparks down towards the ground in unison. Before we move on, be sure to subscribe to Top 5s with notifications on. Number 6. Skyladder. Artist Kaiko Chang has made a number of unusual fireworks throughout his career, but the most famous one was called the Skyladder. In June of 2015, he displayed a work that saw a fiery ladder appear in the sky. It appeared to form on the ground and burn upwards. This, of course, wasn't done with specially crafted rockets, but required meticulous engineering and planning to create. A special 1,650-foot-long ladder was built and covered with explosives, and as some images will show, the far end was suspended high in the air by a balloon. The end result was undoubtedly one of the most amazing fireworks display ever conceived. And even though there were only several hundred people lucky enough to see it in real life, it's no surprise that videos of it went viral, and they were released a few weeks later. Number 5. Largest Sparkler Candle. Sparklers are a fun way to have some close-up firework action when you're at a display. But in 2016, Ukrainian Yuri Yaniv decided to work on a project to supersize them. He collected 10,000 sparklers and carefully packed them all within a heavy-duty garbage can before attaching a fuse and setting light to the whole thing. If he had burned them individually, he would have been able to keep going continuously for 2 days, but in the event, his creation only lasted for a few moments. Luckily, he was very careful with how he did it and set it up in an abandoned field and ensured he had 2 fire extinguishers on hand just in case things got out of control. He said that the most difficult thing about the plan was waiting for the weather to be perfect, because earlier in the day the wind had been blowing too hard to have been able to successfully set fire to the pyro. But when things settled down, they were ready to go. Another group has recently set a record with a whopping 100,000 sparklers. Number 4. Cherry Blossoms. Japanese fireworks events are like none other, and they combine explosive shells with their traditional aesthetic to create stunning displays. There's one effect that's often called the cherry blossom, which sees multiple rockets being detonated over one another to create the impression of cascading blossoms in the height of spring. There's a very simple reason why Japanese fireworks seem so different from elsewhere, and that's because of the way they take into account the perspectives of the people watching. In most places, there's a very specific place where crowds will be stood to see them, so the explosions are designed to look their best from that angle. But in Japan, fireworks are viewed more like a festival, and consideration is to put in what it will look like from all around. They are therefore fuller displays that are conceived in a three-dimensional fashion instead of like painting on a two-dimensional canvas, which combined with the tradition of making them look flower-like makes for an equal and inclusive experience. They have a long history and plenty of experience in creating the best show, as the first Japanese firework festival that still runs to this day took place in 1733. To organize a display also requires qualifications and years of study, and each craftsman makes sure to put their own message into every work that they design. Number 3. Giant UAE Shell. New Year's Eve celebrations around the world are marked by giant fireworks extravaganzas that see cities competing to put the most talked about shows. And in 2018, the United Arab Emirates pulled out all the stops to do something bigger and better than anyone had done before. They built what would be the largest fireworks shell to have ever been detonated until the record was broken in 2020, that is. And the event was an amazing spectacle. The shell itself was 56 inches wide and weighed 2,400 pounds and was sent into the sky above Al Marjan Island. It was too big to be able to launch itself, so a series of mortars and other explosives were used to propel it up into the air. It shot up with a trail behind it for 15 seconds before detonating in such an eruption of fire that it looked quite similar to the launch of a spaceship. It seemed to hang in the air at first with a trail of reddish-white light, but then it turned to a deep shade of orange. It happened at the end of a 10-minute display that had seen almost 1 million people show up to watch, and was more than a fitting finale for the event, and an incredible way to bring in the new year. Number 2. Demolition Fireworks. Fireworks are used to celebrate a range of different events, but one of the most unusual and creative took place in Las Vegas in 2007. The New Frontier Casino and Hotel was the second resort to open on the Strip, and had continuously operated since 1942, hosting Elvis's first Vegas performance in 1956, and the final show by the Supremes with Diana Ross in 1970. It was an incredibly important site in Vegas with a rich history, but by the 1990s, the owners were beginning to struggle to keep up with the other resorts that were springing up. A series of strikes through that decade, combined with a lack of investment, led to plans being devised to replace the New Frontier with a new structure fit for the new millennium. But the owners were left with one question: how to remove the structure that was already there. They couldn't just quietly dismantle such an iconic venue, which had made its name with bikini bull riding, cheap room, and $5 craps, and realized that they had to do it in a Vegas way. They came up with the plan for a large fireworks display arranged around the hotel's demolition as a fitting farewell. On November 13, 2007, the New Frontier was packed with more than 1,000 pounds of explosives, as well as countless fireworks that were attached to all of its windows. That evening, the venue was lit with floodlights. The TV crew from Discovery Channel set up their cameras to get the perfect shots, and the display began. Hundreds of fireworks were set off around the hotel in a display that began by looking like any other. But then the structure began to be covered with a wall of fire, with rockets and flares erupting from its roof. Next, they began to shoot out from the windows, and then everything goes dark. With the sound of alarms in the background, a fuse was lit and streamed towards the hotel, which triggered a countdown of numbers being emitted by sparks before the demolition explosives were triggered, and the hotel fell to the ground. Plumes of smoke wafted up into the air, but soon settled, and the Vegas skyline was changed forever. It's one of the most unusual types of fireworks displays you could ever see, and one of the most spectacular demolitions you could ever witness. It was just a shame that the plans for the building to replace it fell through, and still more than 10 years later, the new owners of the plot are still to decide what to do with it next. Number 1. Longest Firework Waterfall. Firework waterfalls are long-lasting and beautiful installations, so it's perhaps no surprise that they're a popular design to be used when trying to set new world records. The current record holder for the longest one ever displayed is Ras Al Khaimah, one of the 7 emirates of the UAE, which held a huge fireworks display to celebrate the new year on the 1st of January 2020. The waterfall on that occasion was 2.35 miles long, and was the climax of the display, lighting up the entire coastline during the 13-minute performance. this wasn't the only record that was set that night either. They also broke the record for the most unmanned aerial vehicles for launching fireworks simultaneously, something that required extreme precision and planning to pull off. Subscribe to Top 5s for more and check out some of our other popular videos.